Hey everyone, welcome to MezFi Meets episode 6. This is with Jerome CEO of MezFi, and Lee Robson from iStories. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
So, Lee Robson is the head of iStories, which is a PR and communications firm that works in all aspects of PR and comms, but specializes in Web3 communications. As a full disclosure, MezFi and iStories are working together at the moment, and so Lee's done a lot of great work with us. But I'm here today more to discuss his origin story in PR and communications, and I'm really interested, Lee, in how you got into Web3 in the first instance. So why don't you talk a bit about what ignited that passion for the Web3 industry? And I know you love NFTs, so why don't you talk a bit about that as well?
Yeah. So I guess for me, it maybe started about 4 or 5 years ago, and a friend and I were looking for something more creative to do with a bit of extra cash we had, and interest rates were historically low back then, so no point in really keeping it in a bank account. So we started dabbling in a few kind of startup investments, most of which have since failed. A few bits of stocks, most of which are now dropped, given the kind of global market, and that kind of led us to crypto. Just looking at, back in the bull run back then, it's quite exciting to see, wake up each morning and see, various coins up by 20, 30%. It was quite a refreshing, having seen most of our stocks do very little. So I guess that was my entry point. Back then, we didn't dabble in NFTs. We didn't feel quite ready for that. But I think my kind of like my shift moment was reading an article about virtual real estate and blockchain real estate.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think at the time my first reaction was that's crazy. You get reading
of
stories
course. I
about
think
Decentraland.
everyone
Yeah,
was like that, I think. Yeah.
yeah. And I read these stories about Decentraland, kind of land changing hands for like millions of dollars. I thought, it's nuts. Why would anyone spend that much money to own something that purely exists in digital? And then, as I read more and I started to ponder more, I started to, and you think more about the long-term play with this, that where this might lead, with the evolution of technology and digital identity and stuff. And then it started to become more appealing. And also at the time I was, looking to get into the property market, the real world, and those two kind of interests collided. And so I started buying up bits of, kind of digital real estate in these speculative, blockchain-based worlds.
Do you,
And I suppose that kind of dovetailed with a passion I'd always had for, kind of simulations almost in terms of gameplay. Back in the as a kid, spending time in these virtual worlds, and so the idea that these worlds would dovetail with the real world in terms of commerce and be a potential place where you might spend time and do business, it just started to make a lot of sense, and from that point I was pretty hooked.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I'm when you're mentioning the virtual worlds from when you were young, I'm thinking about a couple of things in particular. Nothing. I can't remember any of the names right now, but it's Second Life. I mean, that was like
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
like 15 years ago, wasn't it?
yeah.
What were the specific, like? Are you talking about gaming, like PlayStation, or more like PC sort of based stuff?
Yeah, so look, going back even further than that, I'm going back to like this would have been late 80s, early 90s, kind of 8-bit, 16-bit computers, and a game in particular comes to mind, called Elite, which a lot of people will know. It had a bit of a resurgence. It's been reborn about 5 years ago. It's now on Xbox and stuff, but basically the premise is, you get given a ship and you fly through the galaxy, and it's not like Star Wars, big battles and amazing storylines. You're pretty much this kind of like solo trader flying from star to star, buying like gold at one place for on the cheap, selling it for a profit somewhere else. It's actually
Amazing.
very quite dry, but it's you inhabit this. It's a simulation, and you get drawn into this world. And sometimes it's really dull. You're just flying for half an hour through deep space. Nothing's happening.
Yeah.
Um, but now, with the likes of, Star Atlas, which many people will be aware of, it's been in development for a long time. And, that's taking that concept and it's using blockchain to make it real. So now, obviously pre-blockchain, these games were closed ecosystems. There's nothing you can extract from those worlds.
Yeah.
Whereas now, if I go and buy a resource somewhere in Star Atlas, the theory is, and then sell it for a profit somewhere else, that profit I can take. It's something real. It's something I can use elsewhere. And that's, still the kind of kid in me that loved that experience is quite excited by that. And of course, I don't have the hours to while away my time drifting through deep space these days. but still the
No.
ability that that is an option or will be an option is really cool.
Nice. Yeah, no, look, I'm a gamer too. I think about I was more a Nintendo guy. I'm probably a bit younger than you, I guess. So, the 80s and 90s I sort of spent with Mario and Link and Legend of Zelda and stuff. So, I really enjoy look, these days I don't have any time for gaming whatsoever. Um, but I struggled, I'll be honest with you, getting my head around the metaverse at the beginning. So I'd be interested to know. So do you still hold your Decentraland or what the metaversal land that you purchased? Have you held on to that still?
Yeah, I have, and half because I'm still, still genuinely believe that, there's a future for this stuff, and I want to have a presence there for all the reasons I just discussed. The other is that, obviously with the bear market, the value of that holding is a fraction of what it was when I bought it. So, the belief is and the hope
Yeah.
is that it will resurge, and that's why I'm still there. So yeah, look, and I'm very aware that of all the various holdings I acquired, at least half, if not more, will probably they'll never come to fruition. They might
Yeah.
never reach an audience, but some might, and to even have a piece in that game and a kind of a share in that potential future to me is pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. So let's talk a bit then about comms and PR. So, I think we when we met, iStories was it was relatively young, but at the time I remember you had a few businesses on the books, but since we've started working together, you've done this transition from being a generalist sort of PR and communications firm, and now you've got this sort of focus, I guess, not fully, but you are focused on Web3 communications. So I'm interested, being a professional of a number of years, do you find any particular differences in the way you have to approach, Web3 communications versus Web2? I mean, and how did that shift come about for you, I guess?
Yeah, so I think, there are some big differences. I think, the speed and the transparency with which Web3 brands, evolve and build themselves, there isn't as much luxury of careful planning and rollout plans that, rely on this opaque, building and then being released into the world in your terms. I think, with things like Discord and and X and these platforms, things move very fast. There's demand and appetite for constant updates and communication. So that certainly affects the kind of the pace at which you can plan. But I think for me, the reason why I, think I can have, an influence and bring something different is I think there's still a slight credibility problem with a lot of, Web3 and NFT projects. I think, because they're built so fast and because many of them are built by people with relatively little experience, in terms of not just building a product, but how to market and communicate that product. So I
Sure.
think what I bring with, over 20 years of working with, major brands and very influential, people and very kind of disruptive, but very successful long-term businesses is bringing some of that diligence. It's kind of bringing and embedding some of that best practice, and just being a grown-up. I think and just being the kind of person that can be can bring some sage wisdom, some advice, and be a safe pair of hands, but also at the same time know what it's like to have gone through certain kind of quite revolutionary shifts in technology, media, entertainment, which working through the multi-channel kind of boom in the early noughties and a lot of kind of big media plays since then has kind of imbued me with.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you worked for Fox Sports, is it in
Yeah,
Australia,
yeah.
prior to you launching iStories. Were there any particular sort of moments with them that how did you approach that? I mean, because it's very different from, say, MezFi, working with a large company like that. Were you involved in, breaking, stories about the sports people, or was it more like, trying to promote Fox Sports as a brand? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was, as you kind of probably just touched on, it was a lot going on. I mean, I've been fortunate and to some extent cursed to have worked with two Murdoch companies over my career. I spent
Oh
five
God.
years with 5 years with SkyTV in the UK, which is basically the UK and now European version of Foxtel, and then close to 2 years with Fox Sports here in Australia. And look, those companies are tenacious. There's an embedded culture of just, constantly, striving for more, doing things differently. Nothing's ever quite good enough. And it's that restlessness that made them so successful. And of course, it's a very different landscape for them now, being challenged from all corners by the streaming landscape. But yeah, I think, I've got to say, I really enjoyed both my stints with those companies. Not that I have an ideological kind of alignment with Murdoch, generally, but his companies are good. He builds
Yeah.
successful companies. And for me, I was doing things like, working with a lot of celebrities and launching big brands and working on things that were very much in the zeitgeist at the time. I spent 5 years working on The Simpsons in the UK, which was a real joy. I was in my mid-20s then, and my job was to go to work and watch The Simpsons. It didn't really get
Man, that
much
would have been good.
more. Yeah, I had a lot of very jealous friends at the time, and that was my job, and it was great. And I think I did a good job because I liked it, and it was, I didn't have to pretend. And I think that authenticity was really important. And I think as well, that's what comes through in my decisions these days, and again to transition to Web3, because I think with Web3 in particular, yes, you have to have an interest and an involvement in the space yourself, because it just moves so fast, and there's so much to kind of get your head around that if you're not interested or you're faking it, you'll very quickly get left behind and found out. So for me, that's been a really important thing to carry with me as I transition across different facets of my career into different areas and with different brands. Is finding stuff that I have some kind of relation with or kind of interest in, because that's where you do your best work.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so something that comes to mind for me, I guess, is that, a lot of the MezFi Meets podcasts that we've done so far, the people that come on, they have skills and skill sets that other people may not have. And, one thing that I found really interesting is to talk about process a bit, and lift the hood, I guess, on the way that these kinds of things work, and give some tips to people who don't necessarily have those skills and haven't learned that experience and knowledge like what, say, you have over a
Mm,
20-year, 25-year
mm,
career. A lot of Web3 people out there who are starting what are effectively businesses. They may not have, the PR knowledge. They may not have the communications knowledge. They may not have a PR or communications specialist. What kind of advice can you give them about, what, positioning, speaking to media, maybe tools for them to use to be able to get their products out there into media more. What kind of advice do you think you can give, Web3 founders, and people who are looking to, push something out there in terms of PR and communications?
I mean, look, there are so many different ways of doing this. So many different approaches, and even in the 20 years I've been doing this, I've probably only scratched the surface. There are a million different practitioners and ways of doing things. Look, I think at the heart of it, and most people, if not all, will tell you this, is, it's finding your story and finding angles. I think what I've always been very good at and what I enjoy is, kind of restarting at that analytical point of view and kind of pulling out strands, pulling out ideas, pulling out potential narratives. You really want something, a unifying thread, something that gives you, a bit of a story from where you are now to where you're going to be in a year or two's time. Within that, you want a bunch of mini stories that kind of take you along the way. But I think, it's about finding, a bit of heart as well. I think people relate far more to, people and personalities than they do to facts and figures and stats. So, make it personal, make it compelling. And look, again, I think the thing is that this isn't for everyone. I think, I've come across lots of people in my time, my line of work, and writing. Yes, there's a formula to it. Yes, there's a structure to it, and those things can be learned. But there's also an inherent talent that comes through a commitment to the practice and the art, and it is an art as well. You do have to, any writer will tell you only get better by writing more and more. That's the only, and I must have written 10,000 press releases in my life, and
I
you
can
know I
imagine.
yeah, I can knock them out pretty fast because I've done them time and time again. But I still learn, I still get better, and I still enjoy, finding better ways to write things. So if you don't have that innate passion yourself as a business owner, find someone who does. Get someone who's willing to and interested in committing their time to that. Because one, you will just frustrate yourself by trying to do it if you don't really have the time and interest, and two,
Yeah.
you'll fall short. And again, and then the other thing I would say is that, look, there is a temptation, to lean on AI. And I will absolutely say it's amazing. I use it.
Yeah.
I'm sure every PR person uses it. But there's a trap there. You don't want to fall into relying on it. It's a useful kind of platform. But I truly try and resist the temptation to use it even for a first draft for something that I want to have an original insight at its heart, because you get the temptation is to use too much of what AI gives you, and by doing that, you're originating anything. And for me, that's where I think the kind of the distinction in AI's ability comes through. In that, yes, it can create, but I don't think it really has the ability yet to be inspired. And I think people can. I can be inspired by 20 years worth, 30, 40 years worth of random influences, and that will lead me to an idea and a way of saying things that, an AI can't do. So it can create, but I wouldn't rely on it for inspiration.
Yeah, so well, I know you know that you love AI and you're a big proponent of all of the AI tools. I'm totally agree with you. I've my experience of AI is that for production and creation of content is that I end up leaning on it too much, and then the voice ends up getting a bit lost, or my voice ends up getting a bit lost in it. I found that AI tools are great for research,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
giving you ideas, but fundamentally the human element. And I mean, Mentis and I talked about on episode 3 the Turing test. And I'm sure you remember Alan Turing, the Turing test.
yeah, yeah.
And again, I mean, as close as we are to not being able to differentiate between an AI and a human being, if you're with an interaction, there's still over a prolonged period or even a medium term period, which is, more than a few minutes, I find that there's definitely a human element lacking in AI production as opposed to, say, AI research. So I
Yeah,
totally agree with
completely.
you.
I think it was Charlie Brooker, who's the kind of creator behind the Black Mirror series. I think at South by Southwest, he said last year, and he was questioned about it and said, AI isn't messy enough to be truly, creative. It's neat. It does
Yeah,
things
good.
extremely well. It does things way better than we can, but it lacks that kind of, that moment where it might just, have a brain melt, or something random pops into its head from 20 years ago that's unrelated, that inspires something completely tangential. They're the things that we have, that chaotic kind of, human brain that AI will never have. You can program it to be chaotic if you like, but it's still a program. It's still relying on an algorithm that someone else has written for it.
I'm sure there would be a way at some point to, well, like you're saying. So I mean, not that we want to start talking philosophically about the existence of God or anything like that. Um, I'm not here to give an opinion either way. But if you were to believe in a creator, so to speak, then for instance, then you would have a situation where creators created us, and we would, we have the ability for these random things by creation and by design, and then we would then also have, and I mean, Elon Musk is a bit of a proponent of this kind of thinking, the where we potentially live in a simulation, and then we have our simulations that we create that then mirror our sort of experience of reality, and perhaps we can imbue enough randomness and volatility and inspiration into these things that one day they may act the same way. Now that obviously totally falls down if we decide that everything's random and created through the universe and the Big Bang and all this sort of stuff, which I don't know either way. I couldn't tell you, so yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't have the answer to that one either, but yeah, look, I think, to be honest, who knows where it might go? I mean, I say that if you had shown me 2 years ago the stuff that ChatGPT can do today, I would have, barely believed you. It's
No
so,
way.
and if that's the pace of change in 2 years, what's 20 years going to look like? By the end of our lifetimes, it's inconceivable to imagine where we might be, and what tech might be able to do. It's just it's constantly surprising us. It's just about, I guess our biggest role is maintaining our relevance and our our contribution, and that's a whole other conversation about, kind of, global redundancies and the incursions of AI and stuff like that. But, we still, we don't want to get to a point where, there is no human element anymore. Otherwise, it's, what's the point of anything? And I read that
Yeah.
theory about the dead internet theory the other day about the fact that, or this idea that it's already too late, that they're now, the internet is just AI talking to AI, and there's no, humans aren't there anymore. It's yeah,
Interesting.
it could happen if we're not careful.
It could happen if we're not careful. To your point about, if someone had shown you ChatGPT 2 years ago, you wouldn't have believed it. I'm reminded of the quote, and I'm not sure what the exact quote is, but people generally overestimate what can be done in a short period of time and underestimate what can be done over long periods. So
Mm-hmm.
I think if you think about, where ChatGPT is today and where it will be in 20 years, we'll probably overestimate how much growth there'll be in that 20 years, because you're also not you but we discount the fact that machine learning has been evolving for the last 70 years or 50 years to get to where it is today. If you talk to AI experts, they're not surprised about ChatGPT because it's created over such a long period
Mm-hmm.
of time.
Mm-hmm.
We, the public, have only seen what it can do in the last 2 years
True.
since it was released. But just like, back in, what was it, like the 90s, we were talking about flying cars in 2020. And that certainly hasn't happened. But then equally over a longer period of time, we may underestimate some other, evolution of technology that may be equally fascinating and equally surprising in terms of how it's gotten to. I mean, let me ask you this question though. So being at the coal mouth of communications, journalism, newspapers, all this sort of stuff. I mean, do you think that there's a threat to the current way of journalism, news, and everything else from AI and AI tools and everything else like that?
I mean, look, journalism has been under threat really for as long as I've been, operating in this space. I think, even 20 odd years ago when I was looking at different career paths, and journalism is one of them, there's already a sense that, you know, where is this going to go from here? And, I've lived through when I was started working PR, there were no, there were no websites, there were no news outlets. I worked through the evolution, that kind of stuff. And I've seen that explosion. And then, of course, we've seen the contraction over the past kind of 10 years as newspaper, print kind of starts to die. And again, I've seen the kind of concentration of roles, so fewer journalists are expected to do more with less experience and less tools. It's a really difficult industry to be in. And it's obviously incredibly valuable and we need to protect it and retain it. But at the end of the day, you can't halt progress. And, people are constantly demanding, faster news, more personalized news. And it doesn't matter what our kind of, reservations are about where that might lead or our appetite for it. It's, if the technology allows it and people demand it, it will happen. So, look, I think journalism has been trying to find its way in the new digital world ever since it was born. And I don't think any company can say they've truly cracked it. Again, there's that story last week, I think, of News Corp, taking $250 million from ChatGPT. They need the money, put it basically. They're still propping up failing outlets all over the world. So I don't know really, what the answer is to that, other than to say that, we can't pretend that AI isn't coming. We can't pretend it isn't going to make the user experience better. We have to accept that there will be, a certain element of traditional and Web2 media that dies as a result of that. But at the end of the day, provided we can maintain, a human interest and a human stake, we have to find a way to integrate AI because it's not going away.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, potentially, there are blockchain elements that could be integrated in order to harness, the AI a bit. But yeah, it's definitely a hard one to figure out for sure. What about deepfakes? I mean, are you concerned about deepfakes in media? Like, I have to say this may make me sound a bit silly. But there was a press conference at the end. I don't know if you watch basketball, but it's the NBA playoffs at the moment. Eastern Conference Finals. Actually, it was Western Conference Finals. Dallas Mavericks versus the Timberwolves. And at the end of Game Three, or Game Two, I can't remember what it was, but there was Luka Doncic has been absolutely tearing it up. Like 30 points a game. They're up 3-0. I think right now is they're having their fourth game. But anyway, there was a deep fake of him at his press conference talking about certain things, and for a moment, about a minute of the thing, it sounded a bit funny. He was saying these weird things, and I totally forgot that there was a possibility of it being an AI deepfake. And so I was very much fooled in that moment, and I can only imagine how bad it may get. I mean, is that something that you're concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is a massive worry. I think there'll always be rogue actors. I'm sure the tech has existed for long enough that anyone can doctor a PDF or change an email or doctor a photograph. Again, we're still having debates around airbrushing and image manipulation, and this kind of deep fake is just the next step of that. Um, there's probably no way of stopping it unless detection software becomes so good that it eradicates it. But then every time we make a leap forward in detection, someone else will make a leap forward in fooling that detection. So I think we just have the trick is the key is education and awareness. People need to know that this stuff exists in order to be wary and ready for it.
Good
Because
point.
let's face it, we're all bombarded every day with spam text, spam emails, and we're getting better. We have to get better at looking closely at the email address, at the phone number, at the way the text is written, and we're going to have to apply that same level of scrutiny to the videos we see and the content we consume, because it's simply that good, and it's only going to get better. It's a shame, because for every person like you and I who is relatively well versed in this kind of stuff, there'll be someone out there, my mum, who might not
Yeah.
be, and they're the people that get taken in for, and taken into these scams and fooled by this, kind of like this doctoring. And so yeah, again, it's education, but there's always going to be cohorts of society that are unwilling or unable to kind of keep up, and they're the susceptible ones. I suppose that's where governments have to intervene and do what they can to protect them.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I mean, those scam texts come through much more than you'd hope that they would, on your mobile phones. I mean, it's a very new thing, obviously, for scams to be able to replicate the real thing so much that it's almost impossible to discern the difference. I mean, when we work, we as you said, you and I, we walk in the Web3 world. We both have X accounts. So, we've both been on it for a while. I've been even fooled a few times by impersonations of accounts that I follow, and people DMing me and pretending to be someone else. So, I can only imagine the level it's going to get to. Again, Mentis, we were talking about the new tool from OpenAI, ChatGPT. Do you remember the name of it? I've forgotten right now.
Sora,
The
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 video one.
Sora, yeah, the video
Yeah.
one. So you know we've got the American election coming up, and OpenAI is actually they've come out and said where they're actually delaying the release of that so that
Mm-hmm.
the AI deepfakes don't happen for the election.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that we have to be concerned about? Election manipulation into the future as well. I mean, like, and have you been involved? I mean, have you ever done any communications work in politics? That's a really interesting area.
Yeah, I mean, only on the periphery. I did a bit of work with the UK Foreign Office, God, a long time ago now, 20 years or so ago. And yeah, there's a whole other level of, kind of diligence that is involved when you're doing any kind of government communications. But look, I mean, I completely understand OpenAI's decision to delay that until afterwards. But that's one election in one country.
Yeah,
We've got
exactly.
a UK election coming up not long. It'll be Australia soon. What are you going to do? How are you going to protect governments and people and voters all over the world, so I don't know how it's possible. Because I say every time, the kind of the guardians get better, the kind of the bad actors get better as well. So, but I think as when people always point to the scams that taint, Web3, it's kind of like it's not scammers weren't born with Web3. Scammers, have been around since the dawn of time, kind of
For
like
sure.
thieving and stealing. It's a a mindset an issue with, individuals and cultures. It's not a technology born problem, just as, deep fakes won't end and begin with Sora. Again, it just has to be about awareness, and that is a symptom of the age we live in. Everything from being cognizant of the harms of social media, to being aware of fakes, to being aware of scams. It's a complex world we live in these days, and it's not going to get simpler.
No, it's not. That's for sure. I mean, speaking of social media, we haven't only done work, uh, on traditional media. We've also done, a lot of content creation and planning for MezFi on social media. Where do you see, the role of social media in a traditional, media campaign, so to speak, or PR and media campaign? Like, is it side by side? Is it, do you just focus on one and not the other? How do you sort of integrate the two together when you're planning out a campaign?
Yeah, I think, and I still come from, PR writing is the foundation that I've developed my the skills and interest from. And for me, I still, when I look at campaigns, I still look at, for instance, headlines or stories, because they're the things that, if you can make what you're saying transcend your own channels and be picked up by other people who see the value in what you're saying, that's an endorsement of what you're doing. If you're not paying for that space, if you're not writing and posting it yourself, if other people say, I see value in this for my outlet and for the people who read my outlet, that, I think, for me, carries a several, magnitude of weight and influence than self-publishing does. Now, that's not to say, there isn't, I devalue social media. It's just they play different functions. So for me, looking at a campaign, there would be the PR side of things would be the kind of the big tent poles, almost the things that kind of define step changes or moments in time that move your story on. Social media is very much the pulse, the momentum. It's a thing that kind of binds things together. It allows you to kind of communicate more, kind of more, um, with more momentum and or more sustenance than PR does. Because, again, the thing with PR is, once that release has gone out, once that story's been announced, your ability to control it is diminishes. It's then in the hands of other people to interpret it and apply your story how they see fit. Whereas, of course, social and own channels give you much, much greater control over doing that. And also, of course, through social, there's the interactivity element of being able to, converse and react and respond to people who engage with you. So, look, it's all very much a dynamic mix. And where you lean and where you lead will depend on what it is you're trying to achieve. But for me, coming from that classic PR point of view, I still look at that campaign in terms of, what are the headlines, what are the things that are going to stand out, and how do we build our messaging around those moments?
Yeah, well, I mean, going viral on social media, I mean, that's sort of out of your control to a degree. I mean, you talk about, in social media being a bit more in control, but, someone posts something and then it gets picked up by other people in social media and they do what they want. I mean, I'm looking at YouTube, sorry, at TikTok a lot these days, and people will, take something, there's this viral video that's gone viral from an Australian influencer, for instance. 40 million views in a couple of days, and then people will take it and they'll make their own out of it. I don't know if you saw, there was a video out of Yorkshire, your neck of the woods, or close to anyway, of these two little girls who have just come back from an ice cream van, and it's hilarious. So you have to watch it after this. I'll put the link to it
Yes, good.
in the YouTube video, but it's so funny. This little girl, and she's complaining about how expensive the ice cream is from the ice cream van, and then it went off, and like people are like kept cutting it and putting it together, and I mean in that way that you can see the power of social media, and it's very
Oh,
similar, like what you're saying. Well, this is why I'm talking about this, is because you were saying, once you put a story out there, you're not in control of it, and people talk about it. But social media is very similar, because once you put something out there, people make it their own. People take ownership of it. And obviously, we're talking about a personal brand versus a business, so it's a different kind of thing. But still, I mean, there's definitely that element of social media where you can perhaps plan out things that you want other people to grab and make their own, and put out there as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's amazing these days that anyone can be, anyone is a creator. The moment you kind of post an update to X, you're a creator. You're putting content into the world, and the sophisticated, recording and editing software we all carry around in our pockets is incredible. We can do so much, and it's incredibly empowering. It's exciting to see that stuff explode, and that's again, that's something that PR doesn't do, or nearly as effectively, but again, I think that, coming back to the PR leading thing, I think if done correctly, you have the ability to explain your case, kind of build your platform, position, we talk about positioning a lot, position it, what it is you're doing, what it is you're saying, plant enough seeds that then, when you reach, when it starts to cascade through different publications or when it reaches, the social media kind of realm, that at least they're feeding off ideas that you've put there, incredible ideas. Again, if PR does bring it with a far greater degree of credibility than a lot of pseudo influencers or even just ordinary people. If you can work with credible journalists, credible outlets to plant a seed of an idea, you've got far greater chance of being able to influence how that idea is then interpreted and carried than you do working, I think, with some of these more kind of less trusted mediums.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. From the perspective of PR and communications, then again, you know, you're working currently with MezFi, obviously, and we'll be launching soon. There'll be a lot of work with that. What do you see as, another, your ideal sort of company to work with? Giving you a bit of a plug for because I love the work that you do. I think that you're great, and that there's a lot of potential in your work to to sort of lift up some other Web3 companies as well. So what's your ideal sort of partnership, so to speak? What kind of projects would you like to work with in the future?
Well, I mean, I've worked with some, really huge companies, again, the Murdoch companies. So, I work with a, very large supplier of services to the federal government here in Australia at the moment. But, I've got a really good track record with startups, and I do love that startup mentality because, it's a really, it's a blank canvas. You get a lot of passion in the startup world. People are building their ideas. They're not clocking in. They're actually, trying to bring something they believe in to life. I think I have a passion for things that have some kind of like tech edge. I think technology is generally the thing that changes the status quo these days. It has to have a solid idea behind it, but generally, if there's a tech element that facilitates something new, that for me is really fascinating. And look, I've tried my hand at pretty much everything. I think there's probably not a sector I haven't worked in my time, and I've discovered very quickly that the things that I don't have a passion for just don't work for me. Fashion never going to be my thing. So
Yeah,
I could have the biggest fashion brands in the world, knocking on my door. I just wouldn't do a good job for them because it just doesn't resonate with me. So I think anything
totally.
in that tech space, anything in that kind of entertainment space, sport continues to be a big passion of mine as well. Um, but more than that, it's the people behind them. I've worked with some brands that people would you might say are dry on the surface, but the people behind them make it. They're the ones that empower you, give you the stories, respect the process with you, and the process is very important. It really is. Again, doing this for a long time, it really is having the trust and the buy-in of people who respect the discipline and who give you what you need to do the best work on their behalf. They're the kind of people that make this job really really worthwhile.
Yeah, amazing. Well, look, it's been a great conversation today. I've really enjoyed the meandering nature of of both PR, AI. It sort of intersects all very very neatly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I want to ask you at the end because we talked about this before, but let's leave this in a really succinct kind of way. Why don't you give me three tips for any people who are either wanting to get into the PR and communications industry or who have a business and are wanting to do better in their communications? Three tips for those kinds of people. For them to take away three tips to what how to approach PR and communications effectively.
Yeah, sure. Look, number one, read. Read as many kind of newspapers, websites, however much you can. I think even as a kid, I was reading newspapers and magazines, and that very much influenced not just my style of writing, but my interest in writing. And I can when I come to write anything, I can see the story, already on the newspaper, on the website, because I've invested so much of my time and have invested so much time immersing myself in media. That's one thing. The second is write as much as you can. Doesn't always need to be press releases. I was writing short stories and scripts when I was 10 years old, and I still am writing books and things in my spare time. It's having an interest and passion for that, and not that PR starts and ends with writing. There are lots of other ways of doing it, but for me, the written word sits so much of what you're able to do with PR. If you don't really have a mastery of the written word, it becomes much, much harder. Even to make good videos, they're still underpinned by, a script or a storyboard, and that comes down to articulating your vision through writing. So write
Yep.
as much as you can, get better at it. And I guess the third one would just be, look for the unique story, look for the gold, look for something that's different, look for something that's personal. Every business has a personal story. Every business is different, from your founder's origin story to, why your product is special. And just, try and make it interesting. Try and see it through the eyes of someone else reading it, or get someone else to do it for you, because often, business owners and founders are a little bit close to that. But, guaranteed every business will have, at least half a dozen really interesting stories if they go looking for them.
Amazing, amazing. All right, Lee. Well, it's been an eye-opening discussion. I've enjoyed your company as always. Thank you so much for coming on today. Look forward to working together into the future, and I hope other people have found your story and your advice as amazing as I always find it.
Cool. Thanks. Been a pleasure. And I can't wait to see MezFi hit the world very soon.
Amazing. All right. Thanks, mate. Have a great day, and we'll chat soon.
Cheers. You too. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. If you want to find out more about MezFi, go to www.mezfi.com. Follow us on X, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. You can see our shorts there, and look forward to the next conversation, and see you then.